Dog saves lion cub. Her response years later will move you deeply. Deep in the African savannah, a helpless lion cub lay abandoned and close to death. His chances of survival were slim, but fate had something extraordinary in store for him. Enter a dog, a courageous and compassionate creature, who defied all odds to save him. What happened next is a heartwarming tale of resilience, compassion, and an unbreakable bond between two unlikely friends. But what this dog did years later will leave you in tears. Stay with us to discover the extraordinary story that will change the way you view loyalty and friendship. Before we dive into this incredible journey, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and turn on notifications. By doing so, you'll help us share more inspiring stories like this with the world. It was a scorching afternoon in the African savannah, the sun beating down mercilessly as dust swirled in the air. The cries of distant birds echoed through the open plains, but there was no sound of a lion's roar. In the tall grasses, barely visible to the untrained eye, lay a young lion cub, abandoned and struggling to survive. His fur was matted and damp from the sweat of his tiny body, trying to cool itself under the oppressive heat. His eyes were wide with fear, his breast shallow and labored. The cub had been separated from his pride during a fierce storm. He had tried to follow his mother, but the torrential rain had drowned out his cries, and the strong winds had driven him in the wrong direction. He had wandered aimlessly for hours, growing weaker with every step. The only thing that kept him going was the faint hope that his mother would come for him. But as the days stretched into twilight, that hope began to fade. Just when it seemed that the cub would succumb to the harsh conditions of the wild, a figure appeared through the haze of dust and tall grasses. It was a dog, a large tan-colored dog with a long, thick coat that shimmered in the fading light of the evening. Her name was Bella, a rescue dog who had been trained to work with the local wildlife conservation team. Bella was part of a team that worked tirelessly to care for orphaned or injured animals, and she had been out on a routine patrol that day when she found herself in the presence of this tiny, helpless creature. The moment Bella spotted the lion cub, she didn't hesitate. Her instincts as a protector kicked in, and she rushed to the cub's side, gently nudging him with her nose. The lion cub was too weak to fight back, too exhausted to even growl. His body trembled under the weight of his fear and pain, but Bella wasn't deterred. She could sense his desperation and knew he needed help. So she did what any caring creature would do. She stayed by his side. With careful nudges and licks, Bella tried to comfort the cub. She instinctively wrapped her body around his, offering warmth and security. The cub, though scared at first, felt an odd sense of relief wash over him. He had never known the touch of a dog, let alone a stranger who would risk everything to protect him. Yet, in that moment, he didn't feel alone anymore. Bella's presence was a comfort, and slowly, he began to calm down. As Bella looked around, she realized that there was no time to waste. The cub needed help, and fast. The dry heat and lack of food were not the only dangers. Predators roamed the savannah, and without a protective mother, this cub was a prime target. Bella, determined not to let this innocent life be lost, stood up and barked, loudly. It was a signal, a call for help, one that would bring the conservation team to the cub's side. They had trained her for moments like these, where instincts and compassion collided. Within hours, a rescue team arrived. They took the cub into their care, providing him with water and food. Bella never left his side. She stayed close to the cub, keeping him company as the team worked to stabilize him. Her presence was a constant reassurance to the young lion, whose confusion began to melt away. As the night settled in, Bella and the cub shared a quiet bond, a bond that would only grow stronger with time. As the days passed, the bond between Bella and the lion cub only grew stronger. The cub, whom the conservation team had named Simba, began to regain his strength under their care, but it was Bella who remained his constant companion. Every time the team left for a break or a task, Bella would stay by his side, nudging him with her nose, licking his fur, and curling up next to him to keep him warm. The two had formed an unspoken understanding. Where Simba lacked the strength and energy, Bella provided unwavering support, and in return, Simba began to see Bella as more than just a protector. She was his family. Simba's physical recovery came in steady waves, but his emotional scars were far more challenging to heal. He had been abandoned by his pride, alone in the harsh wilderness, left to fend for himself when he was far too young to survive without his mother's protection. The fear he had experienced seemed to cling to him, especially during the nights when the wind howled across the savannah. Every rustling sound, every shadow in the distance, sent him into a panicked state. He was alone in a world that he did not understand, and trust was a luxury he had yet to fully grasp. But Bella was patient. She never forced Simba into anything he wasn't ready for. Instead, she would lay quietly beside him, offering him her warmth, allowing him to rest against her. Slowly, he began to accept her presence as a source of comfort. He no longer flinched when she licked his face or nudged him to play. In fact, he began to seek out her companionship. When the rescue team would call him to eat, Simba would look around, searching for Bella. It was as though her presence reassured him that everything would be okay, that he was safe. One afternoon, as Simba played by the edge of a small creek that ran through the sanctuary, Bella stood watch nearby, her keen eyes scanning the surroundings. The team had left to check the perimeter of the reserve, ensuring that no predators were in the area. Bella's instinct to protect her young charge was as strong as ever. Simba, still a cub, had a playful nature that often got the best of him. He was so absorbed in splashing the water with his tiny paws that he didn't notice the shift in the atmosphere. A sound broke the silence, a deep, resonating growl that vibrated through the ground. Bella's ears perked up, her body tensing as her eyes locked on the approaching danger. Simba's attention snapped to her, confusion and fear evident in his wide eyes. Bella let out a low growl, her stance protective as she moved in front of Simba. The growl grew louder, and then, emerging from the tall grass, was a large hyena, its eyes fixed on the pair. It was clear that the hyena saw Simba as an easy meal, and Bella knew it wouldn't hesitate to strike. Bella stood between the hyena and Simba, her posture firm, her growls intensifying. She was an experienced protector, having faced predators before, but today her heart beat faster as she realized that she wasn't just protecting a helpless pup, she was defending a bond she had come to cherish. The hyena continued to inch closer, its malicious eyes locked onto Simba. The tension in the air thickened, and Simba froze, his small body trembling in fear. Bella barked loudly, her sharp, authoritative tone cutting through the silence of the savannah. The hyena hesitated, looking back and forth between Bella and Simba, clearly sizing up the situation. Bella, sensing the moment of hesitation, took a step forward, her growl reverberating through the air like a warning shot. She was not going to let this predator harm the cub she had come to love. The hyena, recognizing the fierceness of Bella's stance, and perhaps sensing that it had underestimated the situation, turned and slunk back into the tall grass. It was a moment of triumph, not just for Bella, but for the bond she had forged with Simba. In that moment, Simba realized something profound. He was not alone. He had someone who would fight for him, protect him, and love him unconditionally. Simba slowly stepped forward, his little body still wary but no longer shaking in fear. He glanced up at Bella, his wide eyes filled with gratitude and admiration. Bella looked down at him, her tail wagging softly. There were no words needed between them, only the quiet understanding that they were family now. As the days turned into weeks, Simba's recovery continued, both physically and emotionally. The playful cub who once hesitated to leave Bella's side was now exploring the savannah with newfound confidence. He ran through the grasses, leaped into the water, and even attempted to mimic the growls and roars of the older lions he observed from a distance. He was growing into a strong young lion, but he always returned to Bella, seeking her comfort and guidance, just as he had when he was weak and vulnerable. But Bella's role in Simba's life wasn't just about protection. It was also about teaching. She showed him how to navigate the world around him, how to survive in a place where danger could be lurking at every corner. The bond between them was not just one of dependence. It was one of mutual respect. Simba, despite being a lion, understood the value of Bella's presence and guidance. And Bella, in turn, had come to see Simba not just as a cub she had saved, but as a friend, a companion, and a symbol of the resilience of life. The weeks that followed Simba's close call with the hyena were transformative. His physical strength grew, but so did his confidence. The bond between him and Bella had become inseparable. He no longer looked at her with the same fear that had once clouded his eyes when he was weak and vulnerable. Instead, he began to see her as a mentor, a guide, and, above all, a mother figure. Their shared moments became more than just acts of survival. They were building blocks of a deep and lasting connection. Simba's natural curiosity began to bloom. Every corner of the savannah seemed to offer something new and exciting for him to discover. With Bella by his side, he grew bolder, exploring the wide expanse of their sanctuary with every step. Bella, ever the vigilant protector, watched over him with a watchful eye, always ensuring that he was safe from harm while encouraging him to explore his world. She had become not only his guardian, but also his partner in the grand adventure of life. One morning, as the sun rose over the horizon, Bella and Simba were out for their usual morning stroll. The soft golden light bathed the savannah, casting long shadows across the open plains. Simba pranced ahead, his young body full of energy as he pounced on the tall grasses, his little paws kicking up dust behind him. Bella followed at a slower pace, her eyes scanning the surroundings. She was relaxed but alert, always mindful of any potential threats that might lurk nearby. As Simba ventured deeper into grass, he paused suddenly, his ears perked up. He had heard something unfamiliar. Bella immediately slowed her pace and moved closer, her body tensing. Simba's eyes were wide, his muscles stiff, his instincts kicking in. He turned to Bella, waiting for a cue, and Bella gave him a reassuring nudge with her nose. It was as if she were telling him, "You're not alone. We've got this." The tension in the air was palpable. From the brush ahead, a figure emerged, a small, disoriented gazelle, limping and clearly injured. Simba's curiosity overcame his initial fear, and he cautiously approached the animal. The gazelle, frightened and weakened, stood frozen, unable to escape. Bella moved beside Simba, her protective stance unwavering, but she was also cautious. They had both learned that not all creatures were enemies, but that did not mean they weren't dangerous. Simba looked up at Bella, silently asking for guidance. Bella nudged him, signaling that they should approach slowly. They moved toward the gazelle together, Bella standing at the ready in case any danger appeared. Simba, however, was intrigued by the injured creature. He moved a bit closer, his young mind wrestling with the instincts of both predator and companion. He had never interacted with a creature so fragile, yet he felt a strange pull of empathy for it. As Simba inched closer, the gazelle let out a soft whimper. Simba stopped, taken aback by the sound. Something inside him stirred, a feeling he had never experienced before. He was a predator by nature, yet here he was, standing in front of an animal that was not his prey, but something in need of help. For the first time, Simba felt the weight of his responsibility to protect, not just as a predator, but as a living, breathing creature capable of compassion. Bella watched her cub, sensing the change in him. She could see that Simba had grown not only in strength, but in his understanding of the world. The bond they shared was not just one of survival anymore. It had become something deeper. Bella had always known that Simba was destined for greatness. She had seen the spark of potential in him from the moment she saved him. But now, she saw something else. Simba had begun to understand what it meant to care, to offer kindness to those who needed it most. With Bella's encouragement, Simba moved closer to the gazelle. He sniffed at the injured animal, his gentle nose brushing against its side. The gazelle flinched slightly but did not run. It seemed to trust Simba, perhaps sensing the same warmth and protection that Bella had given him. Simba gently nuzzled the gazelle, trying to comfort it. Bella stood by, her watchful eyes never leaving the scene. She was proud of Simba. He was becoming more than just a lion. He was becoming a leader, a protector in his own right. Simba didn't know what to do next. He had never been in a situation like this before, and the weight of his actions fell heavy on his young shoulders. But Bella was there, her presence as steady as ever. She nudged him, signaling that it was time to move on. With one last look at the gazelle, Simba turned and followed Bella back toward the sanctuary. The gazelle watched them go, still limping but no longer alone. It was a quiet victory, a moment where Simba had proven that his heart was as mighty as his strength. As the two of them walked back toward the safety of the reserve, Simba felt a sense of accomplishment. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about becoming something more, something that could protect, not just through power, but through kindness. Bella's teachings were sinking in, and Simba was growing into a lion who would one day rule Savannah, not with fear, but with wisdom and empathy. But Simba wasn't the only one changing. Bella, too, had grown in ways she had not expected. She had always known her purpose as a protector. But now, as she watched Simba's transformation, she realized that they were both evolving together. She had saved him, yes, but in many ways he had saved her as well. Through their bond, Bella had rediscovered what it meant to live with purpose, not just as a guardian, but as a partner in the journey of life. As they reached the edge of the reserve, the sun was beginning to set, casting a beautiful orange glow over the landscape. Simba stopped for a moment, looking out at the horizon, the vastness of savannah stretching before him. He felt something stir inside him, a deep sense of belonging. He was no longer the abandoned cub, lost and alone. He had found his place in this world, and with Bella by his side, he knew he could face anything that came their way. As the days passed, Simba grew more confident in his surroundings, and his bond with Bella became even more unbreakable. The savannah, once a vast and intimidating place, was now a familiar playground for the young lion. He reveled in the freedom offered, racing to the tall grasses, climbing rocks, and testing his limits. But life in the wild was not without its challenges, and one day, Simba and Bella would face a test that would push their connection to its limits. It was the early morning hours when the sky was still painted in soft hues of purple and orange. Bella and Simba were resting under the shade of a large acacia tree. Bella, as always, was alert, her ears swiveling at every sound, while Simba lay on his back, watching the clouds drift lazily above. He had grown into a fine young lion, with a sleek coat of golden fur and a mane beginning to show signs of growth. Though he was no longer the fragile cub who had been saved by Bella, he still carried the remnants of that fear, deep within him, where no one could see. But over the past few weeks, his trust in Bella had begun to help him shed that fear. Simba had learned that, no matter what happened, Bella would always be there to protect him. She had proven that countless times. She had saved him from predators, cared for him when he was weak, and showed him the ways of the wild. But this new test would be unlike any other they had faced before, and it would come from an unexpected source. It started when a loud, frantic commotion broke the early morning stillness. A rustling noise from the bush nearby caught both Bella and Simba off guard. Bella's protective instincts flared immediately, and she rose to her feet, her body tense and alert. Simba followed suit, but his steps were hesitant, unsure of what to do. He had faced danger before, but this was different. The air felt heavy with something ominous. Before they could even react, a figure emerged from the brush. Human, a poacher, carrying a rifle, appeared in front of them. The man was tall, wearing worn clothing and a weathered hat. His face was hardened, and his eyes glinted with a cold determination. Bella growled, a deep rumble in her chest, warning the poacher to stay away. Simba, now standing at Bella's side, instinctively looked to her for guidance. He had never faced a human before, and the fear he had once felt started to creep back in. This was something different, something he had never prepared for. The poacher, however, was undeterred by Bella's growls. He stepped forward, pointing the rifle at Bella, his finger resting lightly on the trigger. Bella remained motionless, her eyes locked on the poacher, but Simba could see the tension in her stance. Bella was powerful, but she was also vulnerable in this moment. The poacher had a weapon, and they had no way of defending themselves against it. Simba's heart raced in his chest, his body frozen in place. It was one thing to face wild predators, but this was different. This was a human, a creature he couldn't fight, couldn't overpower with his strength. His instincts told him to run, to flee, but the fear of losing Bella kept him rooted to the spot. He had always relied on her, but now it was his turn to be strong for her. Bella, sensing Simba's hesitation, looked at him. It was a commanding look, but one of deep understanding. It was a silent message. I need you to trust me. You need to trust yourself. In that moment, Simba realized what he had to do. He could no longer depend solely on Bella's protection. He had to stand by her side, even if it meant facing the unknown. The poacher took another step forward, but Simba, his muscles tense, moved forward with newfound courage. He growled low and deep, his voice shaky but powerful. It was a challenge, a declaration that he was not afraid. Not anymore. Bella, seeing Simba's bravery, stood tall beside him, her growl intensifying. The poacher paused, surprised by Simba's defiance. He hadn't expected the young lion to stand his ground. For a moment, there was a tense silence between them. Bella's growl grew louder, her body shifting into a more defensive stance. Simba watched her carefully, understanding her every movement. He was ready now, ready to fight beside her. But just as the poacher raised his rifle, a loud roar echoed through the air. It wasn't the roar of a lion, but of something far more frightening. From the shadows of the trees emerged another figure, a massive lioness, the leader of the pride. She had heard the disturbance and was ready to protect her territory. The poacher, realizing that he was outnumbered and outmatched, hesitated. Simba watched in awe as the lioness charged at the poacher, her speed and strength unmatched. The poacher stumbled backward, his rifle falling from his hands. Bella and Simba remained still, watching as the lioness, with a swift swipe of her claws, sent the poacher running in the opposite direction. The lioness, now standing tall beside Simba and Bella, gave a low growl, a warning to the poacher that he had overstayed his welcome. With the danger gone, Simba exhaled a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His heart was still racing, but there was a sense of relief in his chest. He had faced something more terrifying than he had ever imagined, and yet he had stood his ground. He had trusted Bella, and he had trusted himself. It was a test of his courage, and he had passed. Bella turned to Simba, her eyes softening as she nuzzled him gently. Simba looked up at her, a deep sense of gratitude in his heart. He had come so far, but there was still much to learn. He was not just a cub who had been saved from the wild. He was becoming a lion who could protect, who could fight for what was right. The lioness, having chased off the poacher, now looked at Simba. There was no recognition in her eyes, no sense of pride for the young cub who had fought with bravery. She was simply another lioness, her focus on survival, on the hunt, and on the future of the pride. But Simba understood that, in this world, he had to rely on more than just himself and Bella. He had to learn to stand alongside others, to be part of something greater than himself. Simba had never known life could be so complex. He had learned much since his days as an abandoned cub, but as he grew, so did the challenges that awaited him. What he had yet to fully understand was the price of loyalty, the depth of sacrifice, and the true meaning of strength. Bella had shown him how to trust, how to protect. But now, Simba was about to learn that sometimes the strongest creatures are those who are willing to give up everything for those they love. The savannah was quiet one evening as the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting an orange glow across the wild. Simba and Bella were resting near a small watering hole, the air warm with the last vestiges of daylight. Bella lay with her eyes half closed, her body stretched out lazily, while Simba, now fully grown and powerful, stood nearby, his gaze on the horizon. He had grown into a magnificent lion, his golden mane catching the light of the setting sun. But despite his strength, there was a restlessness in his eyes, a question that had been plaguing him ever since his encounter with the poacher. Was he truly ready for the world beyond the sanctuary? As if sensing his turmoil, Bella rose from her resting spot and padded over to him. She sat down beside him, her warm presence bringing comfort. Simba glanced at her, his eyes searching. Bella met his gaze with a knowing look. She had always been able to understand him in ways no one else could. She had raised him, protected him, and watched him grow. But now, Simba needed to confront the world on his own terms. "You're thinking about the outside world, aren't you?" Bella's voice was soft, her tone not questioning but understanding. Simba nodded, his gaze never leaving the horizon. "I've learned so much from you, Bella, but I don't know if I'm ready for the world out there. The wild is unpredictable. It's dangerous." Bella's eyes softened as she looked at Simba. She had been through it all. The dangers, the heartbreak, the choices that had made her the protector she was today. But she also knew that Simba's growth was inevitable, and it was time for him to face the world. She had raised him to be strong, to survive, and she had to let him face his own fate. There's always danger. Simba, there's always fear, Bella said quietly. But there's also beauty. There's freedom. You'll never truly grow until you face it. You've learned how to trust, how to love, and how to protect. Now, you need to learn how to lead. Simba's heart was heavy with uncertainty. He had grown attached to Bella. She had been his anchor, his guide, his mother, and the thought of leaving her behind, of stepping into a world without her by his side, left him feeling exposed, vulnerable. But just as Simba opened his mouth to express his fears, the ground beneath him trembled. A low, guttural growl rumbled through the air, sending both Simba and Bella into immediate alert. The sky had darkened faster than expected, and the world seemed to shift on its axis. A pack of wild hyenas emerged from the shadows of the trees, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. They circled the watering hole, their steps silent but their presence menacing. Simba's instincts flared, but Bella's calm voice stopped him before he could move. "Stay behind me," she whispered. Bella stood tall, her fur bristling as she stepped in front of Simba. She wasn't afraid of the hyenas. She had faced them before, but this time was different. Simba was older now, stronger, but the hyenas weren't the only threat. Something else loomed on the horizon, something that would test their loyalty and their bond in ways they hadn't expected. The leader of the hyenas, a massive creature with scars across its face, stepped forward. Its eyes locked onto Simba, and it gave a toothy grin. "The lion cub has grown into a strong young male," it sneered. "But strength alone doesn't keep you alive. I'd say it's time to test that theory." Simba's heart raced. He could feel the tension in the air, the weight of the challenge that had been placed before him. This wasn't just about fighting. This wasn't just about survival. This was about his place in the world, about proving he could stand on his own. Bella, sensing Simba's unease, turned him, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "Remember everything I taught you. Don't fight with rage. Fight with purpose." Simba nodded, the weight of her words settling in. He had learned how to protect, how to fight, but now he needed to learn how to fight with wisdom. The hyenas may have been a physical threat, but it was his mind, his heart, and his trust in Bella that would ultimately lead him through this. The pack moved in closer, the leader growling low. Simba stood firm beside Bella, feeling the heat rise in his chest. He could feel the instincts of a predator pulling at him, urging him to strike, to prove his worth. But he resisted. The answer wasn't in brute force. It wasn't about proving he was stronger. It was about showing that he had learned from Bella, that he had learned the value of patience, of strategy. As the hyenas closed in, Simba made his move, but it wasn't the attack they expected. Instead of lunging forward, Simba stood tall and let out a deafening roar, a roar so powerful that it echoed to the savannah, rattling the hyenas' resolve. The leader hesitated, taken aback by the sheer force of Simba's call. The other hyenas faltered, unsure of how to react. Bella, seeing the shift in the hyenas' energy, took advantage of their confusion. With a swift movement, she lunged, her teeth sinking into the leader's side. The hyena yelped in pain and backed away, signaling to the pack that the fight was over. Simba stood beside Bella, his breath heavy, his heart racing. He had faced his first true test, and he had passed, not through strength alone, but through wisdom and understanding. He had learned to trust his instincts, to fight with purpose. As the hyenas retreated into the shadows, Bella turned to Simba, her eyes filled with pride. "You did it," she said softly. "You didn't fight with rage. You fought with purpose." Simba looked at Bella, his heart swelling with gratitude. He had made it through his first real test, but it wasn't just the fight that mattered. It was a lesson that came with it, that true strength wasn't just about overpowering your enemies. It was about knowing when to fight and when to stand strong. The days that followed the encounter with the hyenas were quiet, but Simba and Bella both felt the weight of what had transpired. Simba had been tested, but more importantly, he had learned the true cost of strength and loyalty. The savannah was no longer just a place of survival. It was a place where decisions were made, decisions that would shape his future. It was a cool evening when the news arrived. A new danger had entered their sanctuary. Word from the surrounding reserves had spread quickly. A poacher had set up camp nearby, and he was determined to capture and sell wildlife for profit. Simba and Bella knew that their world was about to change once again. The sanctuary was home to many animals, but Bella and Simba had become its heart. The poacher's presence meant danger not only for them, but for the creatures who had found safety in their haven. Bella, sensing the seriousness of the threat, began to prepare. She instinctively knew that the time had come for Simba to face the world beyond their protected sanctuary. It was time for him to take on the responsibility that came with being a protector, not just a cub. Simba had grown into a strong and capable lion, but now he had to face something more challenging than physical danger. He had to confront the emotional toll that came with protecting those he loved. As the sun began to set, Bella sat with Simba, their bodies side by side, as they looked out over savannah. "You're not just a lion, Simba," Bella said softly, her voice full of understanding. "You're a protector. The world is bigger than us. And sometimes the price of protecting those you love means sacrifice." Simba's heart ached at the thought. He had always known that being strong meant facing challenges, but he hadn't fully understood the depth of those challenges. He hadn't understood that to protect, one sometimes had to let go, to give up something important. "What if I'm not ready?" Simba asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Bella turned to him, her eyes filled with a quiet strength. "You are ready. You've been ready from the moment I saved you. You've grown, Simba. But now, you must decide what you're willing to fight for. The world needs you." Simba swallowed hard. He had always relied on Bella, and now she was asking him to step up and be the protector he had always been destined to become. His body felt heavy with the weight of responsibility, but as Bella nuzzled him gently, he realized that this was what he had been waiting for. He had been raised to face the unknown, to face the challenges that would come, not with fear, but with courage. The next day, the poacher's camp was spotted by the reserve team, and plans were made to deal with the threat. Simba, despite his fear and uncertainty, stood by Bella's side as they prepared for what was to come. The air was thick with tension, but Simba knew one thing for sure. He could not back down. He had to protect this place, just as Bella had protected him. As they approached the poacher's camp, the air was thick with the smell of smoke and fear. The poacher had set traps for the wildlife, but he hadn't anticipated the strength of Bella and Simba. Bella's growl rumbled through the air as she led Simba into the fray. The poacher, seeing the two lions approach, hesitated. He had underestimated them. Simba's body was tense, but his mind was clear. This wasn't just about fighting. This was about protecting the future of the sanctuary. With Bella at his side, Simba moved forward with purpose. He wasn't just a cub who had been saved. He was a protector, the one who would ensure that no harm would come to those under his care. The poacher, realizing he was outmatched, grabbed his rifle and tried to flee. But Simba's roar echoed through the air, a sound that shook the very earth beneath their paws. The poacher froze, his fear palpable as Simba and Bella closed in. They didn't need to fight. The mere presence of the lions, the sheer force of their unity, was enough to send the poacher running. As the poacher disappeared into the distance, Bella turned to Simba, her expression proud. "You did it," she said softly. "You protected everything we fought for." Simba stood tall, his chest swelling with pride. He had faced the fear that had once gripped him. He had stepped into the world beyond the sanctuary and proven that he was more than just a lion. He was a protector. Chapter 7. The journey continues. The sun rose the next morning, casting a warm, golden light across the savannah. Simba stood at the edge of the reserve, gazing out at the horizon. He had faced the trials that life had thrown his way, but now he felt a new kind of peace. He had learned what it meant to be strong, not just in body, but in heart. He had learned that protecting those he loved was not just about fighting. It was about sacrifice, loyalty, and trust. Beside him stood Bella, her body relaxed but her eyes filled with wisdom. They had faced the challenges of the world together, and now Simba knew that his journey was just beginning. "There's still so much to learn," Simba said quietly, his voice filled with a quiet sense of determination. Bella nodded. "And you will learn it in time. But for now, remember this. True strength comes from the bonds we share. From love. From loyalty. You've learned that now." Simba turned to look at her, his heart full. He had come so far since that first moment when he had been a scared cub, abandoned in the wild. Now, he was no longer the frightened cub he had once been. He was a lion, a leader, a protector. As Simba and Bella stood together, the sun rising behind them, Simba knew that their journey was far from over. There would be more challenges, more obstacles to face. But he was ready, with Bella by his side and the strength of the bond they shared. He was ready to face whatever the world had in store for him. And so, the journey continued, not just for Simba, but for Bella too. For as long as they had each other, there was no obstacle they couldn't overcome. Together, they would face the world stronger than ever